I mean, the term exit to community really came onto my radar, I think, 2 years ago with your Hacker Noon post. And then sort of, it was just kind of resurfaced in my personal world when you published this sort of 60-page pamphlet or ebook. And now we're seeing the term used a lot more. I'd love for you to just break it down for us in your own words. What does the term exit to community really mean?
So it's the kind of term that has a specific audience, right? If you ask the vast majority of the human race, what is an exit? They'll like point at an exit sign, or they'll talk about whatever, something that has nothing to do with this. But if you are talking to somebody who's involved in startups in any way, of course they know what exit. This is the purpose of any startup. A startup is a temporary organization that exists in order to exit to a more permanent form. And what that generally means in the kind of conventional economy right now is either an acquisition by a bigger, more boring company that likely will destroy everything interesting about it, or that it will. That it goes on an IPO, a public offering on a stock exchange, which will in other ways destroy whatever's interesting about it, and turn the company into this kind of commodity. In both cases, the thing is, the thing people are putting their heart and soul into becomes, a market, and the community, any community that they build around that product or that network that they've created is a commodity as well. When Slack was just sold, not only was the software sold, but all the people and communities built on that are part of the product that went into the valuation that was sold there. And so the idea with exit to community is, okay, we've got these two classical options. Like, can we have one more option, please? What if we had a third? Everything's better in threes, right? And this is a model or a storyline really, where what if the goal is the community that you're creating becomes the new owner? Now, this is sounds kind of utopian in certain respects, but it's really not. This is grounded in legacies that are very, very real. For instance, I've spent a lot of the last couple of years just before kind of coming out with that Hacker Noon post, I had immersed myself in the work of Louis Kelso, who was a Coloradan here who worked in Silicon Valley for a long time in the 70s and 80s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and was the inventor of the employee stock ownership plan. This is a mechanism by which companies can become acquired by their workers without the workers actually having to put any money. Just like rich people always borrow money to make their investments and really put up their own money, to a significant degree. He developed a mechanism that enabled ordinary workers to acquire capital through financing. And so the kinds of strategies that we're looking at around exit to community are different ways where the relevant communities can become owners, can become core stakeholders in a way that is accessible to anyone, we hope. And so this might involve new kinds of trust structures like purpose trust. This might involve sometimes cooperative structures. It involves policy work. We need to think about how our rules are written. Venture capital is only possible because of policy changes, such as a little tweak to the Prudent Man Rule in 1979. We have to recognize that our existing structures are creatures of policy, and that if we want to have different structures, we may need some slightly different policies. And also, new technologies like cryptocurrencies and tokenization models. And these, present in some ways some of the most exciting opportunities for community ownership. There are also some real challenges, I think, in there that include regulatory and also technical challenges. But one way or another, I think we're really poised for this now. I mean, in 2016, I was involved in a crazy insurgent campaign to convince Twitter to explore models of community ownership, right? And the tech press, it was kind of fun because we got a lot of attention basically for being crazy. Now, in 2018, 2 years after that, Uber and Airbnb approached the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, asking to be able to share ownership with their users, which is not kind of currently legally feasible. Facebook has set up this, this oversight board, that could, eventually become something that like users might elect people to. Airbnb has set up a fund for sharing stock dividends and benefits with their users, as well as a user-elected kind of advisory board. These are baby steps within a structure not designed for this stuff. But even these big, bad, evil companies that I've been, thinking of myself as fighting all this time are actually seeing the value in aligning their interests with those of their users. So suddenly this thing that, seems like an insurgency now feels like something that where even the biggest companies are trying to figure out how to do it. And that to me is a signal, when the radicals and the establishment are kind of actually weirdly aligned on something, it means we have to figure out how to make this work.
Absolutely. And Nathan, like, how does that paradigm shift actually occur, where a lot of these larger businesses are actually, implementing or deploying like an exit to community model? What do you think needs to happen in order for this to come to fruition?
Well, I think it starts with experiments, and this to me comes out of my time studying the history of cooperative business, right? Which is, how is it that we got from, a situation in the 1920s and early 30s where 90% of American farmers had no electricity to a situation by 1950 where virtually all rural America was electrified largely by these electric cooperatives. It started out because in a few places, farmers were able to, use kind of public hydroelectric plants or something, build little cooperatives for themselves, and set up their own power systems. And then some of these were in New York State. The governor of New York State was Franklin Roosevelt. He happened to become elected president. When he saw that this was a national issue, he thought back to examples he had seen in New York State when he was governor, and developed the Rural Electrification Act along with allies in Congress, and one of the most sweeping, successful economic development programs in our history, done entirely through enabling the financing of cooperatives through what became a revenue positive program for the federal government. So, in this way, we need to start with examples. We start to demonstrate that this stuff is reasonable. We find the cases where the kind of low-hanging fruit, where we can show the value and then show the need, demonstrate that, hey, these big companies need this. Hey, there's a whole bunch of entrepreneurs that would love to be able to build using these tools. And I work with a partner called Zebras Unite, a network of founders, largely led by women founders and founders of color, who have felt that the existing models aren't working for them for the kinds of things their communities need and they want to do. And they, and they're trying these things and they're demonstrating that there's a need for it. And then, we need to understand what are the bottlenecks, what are the constraints, and how do we change those constraints, either through technical or business innovations, as well as through policy change and cultural change, helping people see that it's not so scary. This is not crazy. A lot of this stuff has been done before. A lot of this stuff is actually not that new.
Fascinating, yeah. So Nathan, if those experiments are successful, and exit to community is the biggest concept in the world, and now people are going public, through their users, what do you think are the natural implications of this when everyday users become owners and have a stake in the governance of the products and companies they use?
In some ways, I think of it as I think more boring than some people might like. I mean, when you think about some of our large co-owned businesses, right, ranging from REI, the outdoor equipment store, or early Visa, which was a cooperative, the credit card system. Now it's public company, but early on it was a cooperative of small banks, or a lot of Land O'Lakes, Ocean Spray, these kinds of companies, Organic Valley, Associated Press. I mean, Facebook, right? Everybody's focused on Facebook, the biggest, new platform out there. But Associated Press reaches about the same number of people in the world every day. And nobody worries about it because it's got a sound governance structure. It's not like a fiefdom of one, person in their mid 30s. It's an institution that is accountable. And therefore we trust it to, for instance, decide our elections and things like that. Not decide, but call. And so in a lot of ways, I think a world, full of exit to community could be a little less boring, or a little more boring in certain respects. Like the things we need to rely on would just be accountable to us in a way that where we don't have to worry about them as much. But at the same time, they create opportunities for people to participate, to have a say in, for instance, if you are, I'm on the board of an organization called We Own It that helps people organize in their especially rural electric cooperatives or credit unions, right? If your rural electric cooperative is not investing enough in green energy, you can run for the board and force it to, right? If your credit union is not investing in affordable housing enough, you're a member of that. You have mechanisms where you can enter into that discussion and create change. And that should just be available to us. That should be an option for us, just like, running for office in the government. Most of us don't want to do that and aren't going to do it and shouldn't do it probably. Maybe I won't say that last one, but we don't need to, because there's an infrastructure of some sort of process that we can rely on, and we can play our part. And for a lot of this stuff, some people, founders, worry about, like, oh my gosh, all my users are going to be, bugging me all the time and telling me what to do. And really, a lot of these systems are already in place. I mean, if you are running a public company, you already have a huge number of investors, owners. The only difference is those people only care about the business to the extent that it can make them money. Whereas if you're talking about a community of users, these people, care about maybe making a return, but they also care about, like, their personal data not being abused. So the incentive structure is a bit more balanced. And we already know how to do governance with large numbers of stakeholders. It's not that hard. We can always do better. I'm really interested in online governance. I think we can do some really cool new things. But on the whole, we have ways of channeling these kinds of broad-based structures. And so this is not, again, this is not crazy stuff. I think that the potential for transformation in terms of just having, getting out of this world in which we totally mistrust virtually every large institution in our lives, is a radical shift. But in some ways, what I think we're working toward is, a world that is just more reliable, a world that is actually accountable to us, rather than like having these kind of unaccountable, CEO gurus making decisions that we have no say in. I mean, it's a kind of absurd world. We live in the weird science fiction now, and what I hope for is, let's get back on track to the boring Star Trek utopia.